While trekking through dense forest, two hikers stumble upon something impossible, a perfectly intact old circus ground hidden deep in the woods. The faded tents, rusted cages, and eerie silence seem frozen in time. But when they venture inside, they find signs that someone, or something, still lives there. What they uncover beneath the main tent reveals the horrifying truth about what this circus really was, and why it was never meant to be found. The rusted animal cages weren't built for lions or tigers. The performance ring wasn't designed for acrobats. And the underground chambers beneath the main tent hold secrets that explain why dozens of missing persons cases from the past 50 years all lead back to these woods. But what kind of performances were they really staging here? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Chen adjusted his hiking pack and checked his GPS one more time. The orange flagging tape had led them nearly 2 miles off the established trail, deeper into the Montana wilderness than either he or his hiking partner had ever ventured. The forest here felt different somehow, older and more oppressive, as if the towering pines were deliberately blocking out the afternoon sun. "This doesn't make sense," Elena Rodriguez muttered, pushing aside a low-hanging branch. She'd been hiking these mountains for 15 years, and she'd never seen survey markers this far from any development zones. Who would be flagging trail markers out here? The orange plastic strips fluttered in the breeze like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale, except these led away from civilization rather than toward it. Each marker appeared precisely placed about 50 yards apart, creating a clear path through terrain that should have been impenetrable. Marcus paused at the latest marker, examining it closely. "This isn't standard Forest Service flagging," he said, running his fingers over the plastic. "It's heavier duty, like something surveyors would use for permanent installations." Eleanor caught up to him, her breath forming small clouds in the cooling air. At this elevation, even summer afternoons carried the promise of cold nights. "Maybe we should turn back. We're already going to be hiking out in the dark if we don't start heading back soon." But Marcus was already moving toward the next marker, curiosity overriding caution. As an investigative journalist, he'd learned to follow unusual leads. And something about these markers felt intentional, almost like an invitation. The forest began to thin ahead of them, and through the gaps between trees, they glimpsed something that made them both stop dead in their tracks. "What the hell is that?" Elena whispered. Beyond the tree line, a circular clearing opened up like a hidden valley. But it wasn't empty wilderness that greeted them. Instead, they found themselves staring at what appeared to be a complete circus ground, perfectly preserved, as if frozen in time. Striped tents rose from the forest floor in faded reds and yellows, their canvas sides weathered but intact. A central performance ring dominated the space, surrounded by wooden bleachers that had once been painted bright blue. Rusted animal cages lined one side of the clearing, their bars thick and imposing, even in decay. Marcus pulled out his camera, instinctively documenting what he was seeing. "This is impossible. There's no way they could have transported circus equipment this far into the wilderness." Elena moved cautiously into the clearing, her hiking boots silent on the packed earth. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of wind through the pines. No birds sang here, no insects buzzed. Even the air felt stagnant, as if the clearing existed in its own pocket of time. A ticket booth stood near what would have been the entrance, its paint peeling but structure sound. Faded posters clung to its sides, and one in particular caught Elena's attention. She approached it carefully, noting how well preserved everything appeared despite obvious age. The poster advertised Blackwood's Traveling Menagerie with performances dated 1973. The artwork showed traditional circus acts, lions jumping through hoops, acrobats in sequined costumes. But something about the imagery felt wrong. The performers' smiles seemed forced. Their eyes held expressions that looked more like fear than joy. "Marcus, come look at this," Elena called, keeping her voice low without knowing why. Marcus joined her at the ticket booth, studying the poster. 1973, that's over 50 years ago. But look at this equipment, these tents. They should have rotted away decades ago. Elena pointed to details that bothered her. And look at the cages. Those bars are reinforced steel, much heavier than anything you'd need for circus animals. And they're built deep, more like holding cells than performance enclosures. They stood together in the unnatural silence, both sensing that they'd stumbled onto something far more sinister than an abandoned entertainment venue. The clearing felt watched, as if unseen eyes were cataloguing their every movement. "We should document this and get out of here," Elena said. But even as she spoke, she found herself drawn deeper into the mysterious circus ground. Whatever had happened here, whatever these structures had really been used for, she knew they'd discovered something that someone had gone to great lengths to hide. The orange flagging tape that had led them here now seemed less like a survey marker and more like a trap. But it was too late to turn back now. They were already part of whatever dark story this place held. "I'm going to check out the ticket booth," Elena said, pulling her phone out to use its flashlight. "You take a look at those cages. Something about them doesn't sit right with me." Marcus nodded, already moving toward the line of rusted enclosures. "Stay within shouting distance." "This place gives me the creeps." Elena approached the ticket booth cautiously, noting how the wooden structure seemed far too well preserved for something that had supposedly been abandoned for 50 years. The door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the mountain breeze. Inside, dust motes danced in the beam of her phone's light. A wooden counter stretched across the narrow space, and behind it, shelves held what appeared to be admission materials and record books. Elena's breath caught when she realized the implications of what she was seeing. The admission ledger lay open on the counter, its pages yellowed but legible. She flipped through it carefully, her journalism background kicking in as she began to recognize patterns in the handwritten entries. The early pages showed normal circus admissions from 1973, with standard ticket prices and attendance numbers. But as she progressed through the book, the entries became more disturbing. Starting around 1975, she found references to VIP experiences and private viewings, with prices that seemed astronomical for the era. What made her stomach turn were the names in the special booking section. She recognized several from missing person cases she'd covered during her years writing for the local newspaper. Rebecca Manning disappeared 1982. James Foster vanished without a trace in 1989. The entries beside their names contained cryptic codes and notations she couldn't decipher. Elena photographed each page with her phone, her hands trembling slightly as she documented the evidence. The regular circus admissions appeared to have stopped in 1987, but the special bookings continued sporadically through the 1990s and into the 2000s. Behind the counter, she discovered a small hidden compartment built into the wall. Her fingers found the catch almost by accident, and the panel slid aside to reveal a collection of Polaroid photographs bound with rubber bands. The photographs showed audience members at what appeared to be circus performances, but their faces told a different story. Instead of the joy and wonder typically associated with circus attendance, these spectators displayed expressions of horror, disgust, and barely contained excitement that made Elena's skin crawl. The audience members were well-dressed, expensive jewelry glinting in the camera flash. These weren't local families out for entertainment. These were wealthy patrons paying for something far darker than traditional circus acts. Elena heard Marcus calling her name from across the clearing, but she couldn't tear herself away from the evidence she'd uncovered. The admission ledger contained dozens of names, many of which she recognized from unsolved missing person cases spanning decades. She stuffed the photographs back into their hiding place and closed the compartment, but kept the ledger. Whatever was happening here, whatever had happened here, this book contained evidence of crimes that law enforcement needed to see. "Elena, you need to see this." Marcus's voice carried urgency that made her heart race. She emerged from the ticket booth, clutching the ledger against her chest, scanning the clearing for Marcus. He stood beside one of the larger animal cages, gesturing frantically for her to join him. As she approached, Eleanor could see that Marcus had found something that had shaken him badly. His face was pale, and his usual calm demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled agitation. "Look at this," he said, pointing inside the cage. These weren't built for animals. Elena peered through the bars and saw what had disturbed him. The cage interior contained restraint mechanisms that were clearly designed for human occupants. Chains with adjustable lengths, anchor points at human height, and scratch marks on the walls that could only have been made by fingernails. "There's more," Marcus continued, his voice barely above. A whisper. "I found a tunnel entrance under the largest cage. It leads underground, and I can hear something moving down there." Eleanor showed him the admission ledger, quickly explaining what she'd discovered in the ticket booth. As she spoke, Marcus's expression grew increasingly grim. "We're not dealing with an abandoned circus," he said finally. "This was some kind of human trafficking operation disguised as entertainment. And based on what you found in that ledger, it might still be active." The mountain air suddenly felt colder, and Elena became acutely aware of how isolated they were. No cell service, no marked trails, and no one knew where they'd gone. "We need to get out of here," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew they couldn't leave without gathering more evidence. Too many people had disappeared. Too many families had never gotten answers. Marcus knelt beside the tunnel entrance, shining his phone's flashlight into the darkness below. The passage was roughly carved from rock and earth, wide enough for a person to crawl through, but too narrow to stand upright. The air that drifted up from the depths carried a musty, medicinal smell that made his stomach turn. "Elena, bring that ledger over here. I need to show you something else I found." She hurried over, still clutching the admission book against her chest. Marcus led her to the largest cage, its bars thick as a man's wrist and coated with rust that looked more like dried blood in the dim light. Inside the enclosure, partially hidden beneath a layer of old straw, Marcus had uncovered what appeared to be medical equipment. A leather restraint collar lay among the debris, its buckles and straps designed for precise adjustment. But what made Elena's breath catch was the sizing chart attached to it. The measurements weren't for animals. They were clearly marked for human neck circumferences, with notations in different handwriting indicating ages and gender. The smallest size was marked Child 8 to 12 in faded blue ink. "This isn't just about missing adults," Marcus said grimly. "Look at these other items." He'd arranged his discoveries on a clean section of the cage floor. Syringes, vials that had once contained unknown substances, and what appeared to be surgical instruments designed for restraining rather than healing. Everything was old but preserved, as if the dry mountain air had mummified the evidence of whatever horrors had taken place here. Elena photographed each item, her journalistic training taking over despite her growing horror. "Marcus, we need to call the police. This is evidence of serious crimes. No signal up here, remember? And even if we could call, by the time they got a team out here, someone might have cleaned all this up." He gestured toward the tunnel entrance. "Those sounds I heard down there weren't just settling dirt or small animals. Something's moving around in a coordinated way." Elena knelt beside the collar, examining it more closely. The leather was worn smooth in places where it had clearly been used repeatedly. Embedded in the material were what looked like small electronic components, possibly tracking devices or monitoring equipment. "They were tracking people," she whispered, "monitoring them like livestock." Marcus had moved to examine the other cages, finding similar evidence in each one. The enclosures were connected by a series of smaller tunnels, creating an underground network that he estimated extended beneath the entire circus ground. "Elena, and come look at this," he called from the far end of the cage line. She joined him at what appeared to be a supply storage area, hidden behind false panels in the largest enclosure. Inside, they found boxes of medical supplies, some recent enough to suggest ongoing use. Bandages, antiseptics, and prescription medications bore expiration dates from the past 2 years. Someone's been maintaining this place, Marcus said, checking the dates on various items. This operation didn't end in 1987 or even in the 2000s. It's still active. Elena felt the hairs on her neck rise as the implications sank in. We need to get out of here now. But Marcus was already moving toward the tunnel entrance, his phone's light illuminating the passage beyond. We can't leave without more evidence. People are still disappearing, Elena. If we walk away now, how many more will vanish while we try to convince authorities to investigate? And if we disappear down there, how does that help anyone? Marcus paused at the tunnel mouth, torn between caution and the need for answers. The sounds from below had stopped, but the silence felt more ominous than the movement had. Elena made the decision for both of them. 10 minutes, she said firmly. We go down, document what we can, and get out. No heroics, no trying to rescue anyone we might find. We gather evidence and survive to report it. Marcus nodded, understanding the wisdom in her proposal. They secured their phones to ensure the lights wouldn't fail and made sure they both had clear paths back to the surface. The tunnel sloped downward at a gentle angle, its walls showing tool marks from decades-old excavation. As they crawled deeper, the medical smell grew stronger, mixed with something else that neither wanted to identify. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Marcus emerged first, helping Elena out of the cramped passage. What they found in the underground room would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The main tent loomed before them like a cathedral of faded canvas and rusted metal. Elena and Marcus emerged from the underground tunnel system, shaken by what they'd discovered below. But both knew they needed to see the full scope of what they'd stumbled upon. The tent's entrance flaps hung open, revealing glimpses of the interior that made Elena's stomach clench with dread. Marcus pushed aside the heavy canvas, and they stepped into what had once been the heart of Blackwood's traveling menagerie. The space was enormous, easily capable of holding several hundred spectators. 3 performance rings dominated the center, each surrounded by elaborate rigging systems that hung from the tent's peak like metallic spider webs. But these weren't the colorful, festive arrangements of a legitimate circus. Elena's phone light swept across a chalkboard, mounted near what would have been the ringmaster's position. The performance schedule was still visible, written in white chalk that had somehow survived decades of mountain weather. Her blood ran cold as she read the listings. Ring 1, The Broken Swan, ages 16 to 25. Evening shows only. Ring 2, Midnight Auction, varied inventory. VIP access required. Ring 3, Training demonstrations. New acquisitions, private viewings. Below the main schedule, additional notations, categorized performers by physical attributes, age ranges, and what appeared to be psychological profiles. Terms like compliant, resistant, and broken in appeared next to coded identification numbers. Marcus photographed every line while Elena explored the seating area. The bleachers were arranged in tiers, with the highest and most elaborate section clearly reserved for wealthy patrons. Expensive items had been left behind, abandoned in apparent haste. A diamond watch lay beneath one seat, its band snapped as if torn off hastily. Her silk scarf still carried the faint scent of expensive perfume. Elena, look at this, Marcus called from the performance area. She joined him in the center ring, where he discovered equipment that confirmed their worst fears. What appeared to be circus apparatus at first glance revealed itself to be sophisticated restraint and display systems upon closer inspection. The trapeze rigging included anchor points and restraints, designed to immobilize rather than support acrobatic performances. The platforms featured built-in cameras positioned to capture every angle of whatever took place on them. Even the safety nets had been modified with restraint capabilities. They weren't performing traditional circus acts, Elena whispered. They were staging something else entirely. Marcus had found a control booth hidden behind curtains at the tent's perimeter. Inside, banks of video equipment and monitors suggested that everything happening in the performance area was recorded. Stacks of labeled videotapes filled shelves from floor to ceiling, organized by date and coded categories that match the schedule board. "This goes back decades," Marcus said, reading dates on the tape labels. "And look at this equipment. Some of it's new, digital recording gear mixed in with the older analog systems." Elena joined him in the control booth, noting how the camera angles were positioned to capture both the performance areas and the audience sections. They were documenting everything, the performers and the customers. The customer footage would have been invaluable for blackmail or insurance purposes. Elena could imagine the leverage such recordings would provide over wealthy individuals who'd participated in whatever dark entertainment. This place had offered a filing cabinet in the corner of the booth, contained customer contracts and waivers, written in language that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify what participants were agreeing to. The documents referenced exclusive entertainment experiences and specialized performance art without ever explicitly stating what would actually occur. Marcus discovered a hidden drawer containing what appeared to be payment records. The amounts were staggering, with individual performances commanding tens of thousands of dollars. Group events and exclusive bookings reached into the hundreds of thousands. "Look at these client names," Elena said, reading over his shoulder. "These aren't random criminals. These are politicians. Business leaders, celebrities." The customer list read like a who's who of powerful individuals from across the country and internationally. Many names she recognized from news coverage over the years. People who'd built public reputations on family values and social responsibility. As they documented the evidence, Elena became increasingly aware of how exposed they were. The tense entrance faced the forest, but anyone approaching from the other directions would see their phone lights immediately. "We need to get out of here," she said, but Marcus was still photographing documents with methodical precision. Just a few more minutes. This evidence could bring down dozens of powerful people and solve hundreds of missing person cases. Eleanor's unease grew as she realized how much they'd learned and how dangerous that knowledge had become. They weren't just witnesses to abandoned crime scenes anymore. They'd uncovered an active criminal, enterprise with the resources and connections to make problems disappear permanently. The tunnel Marcus had discovered beneath the cages led deeper than either of them had imagined. Following a series of carefully carved passages, they found themselves in a network of underground chambers that extended far beneath the circus grounds. The medical smell grew stronger with each step, mixed with the scent of disinfectant and something else that made Eleanor cover her nose with her sleeve. The first room they entered had clearly served as a medical facility, but not the kind designed for healing. Examination tables with built-in restraints dominated the center of the space, surrounded by cabinets filled with surgical instruments and pharmaceutical supplies. But it was the collection of medical charts scattered across a desk that made Marcus's hands shake as he photographed them. Each chart contained detailed psychological and physical profiles of individuals, complete with photographs that Elena recognized from missing person reports she'd covered over the years. The documentation was thorough and clinical, tracking what the charts referred to as conditioning progress and behavioral modification results. They were systematically breaking people down. Elena whispered, reading over one of the charts. "Look at these progress notes. They document everything from sleep deprivation to drug protocols to psychological manipulation techniques." The charts showed a horrifying timeline of human degradation. Initial assessments evaluated subjects for their marketability and training potential. Follow-up notes tracked the systematic destruction of their personalities and resistance, replacing them with compliance and learned helplessness. Marcus found a filing cabinet filled with hundreds more charts, organized by acquisition date rather than alphabetically. The oldest files dated back to 1973, but new additions continued through recent years. Some charts were marked completed training with disposition codes that neither wanted to contemplate. Others bore the notation in progress with scheduled training sessions and evaluation dates. "Elena, look at this section," Marcus called from across the room. He'd found charts specifically tracking psychological profiles and preferred client matches. The documentation treated human beings like livestock, categorizing them by physical attributes, psychological vulnerabilities, and performance capabilities. Each chart included a section titled Client Preferences, detailing specific requests from buyers. The clinical language couldn't disguise the horrifying reality of what was being documented. These people had been systematically prepared for specific types of abuse based on customer orders. Elena discovered a separate section of charts focused on children, organized by age groups and developmental stages. The psychological manipulation techniques documented for younger subjects were even more systematic and cruel, designed to completely reshape their understanding of reality and normal human relationships. They weren't just trafficking people, Elena said, her voice barely steady. They were custom programming them for specific buyers. Look at these conditioning protocols. They were creating made-to-order victims. The medical equipment throughout the facility supported the chart documentation, drug protocols, sleep deprivation schedules, and sensory manipulation. Techniques were all represented by sophisticated equipment that would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to acquire and maintain. Marcus found evidence that the operation had evolved significantly. Over the decades, early charts relied on crude physical and psychological abuse, but later documentation showed increasingly sophisticated techniques based on advances in psychology and neuroscience. The operators had clearly invested in staying current with the latest methods of human manipulation and control. A computer terminal in the corner of the room was still active, its screen displaying what appeared to be current case files. Elena hesitated before approaching it, knowing that accessing active files would leave digital evidence of their presence. But the need for current information outweighed her caution. The active files contained profiles of recently acquired subjects, some with acquisition dates within the past 6 months. Photographs showed people Elena didn't recognize, but their frightened expressions and the clinical documentation of their progress told a story that made her physically ill. Marcus, we need to contact authorities immediately. These files show active cases. People are being held here right now. But Marcus had discovered something that changed everything. Hidden behind the medical files, he found operational schedules and maintenance logs that indicated the facility was currently staffed and active. Guard rotations, supply deliveries, and client appointments were documented through the current month. Elena, we're not alone here. According to these logs, there's a full shift of personnel on duty tonight. And look at this. He pointed to a schedule entry for the following evening. They have clients scheduled for tomorrow night. The realization that they were currently inside an active criminal operation, surrounded by evidence of ongoing crimes and potentially within reach of both victims and perpetrators, transformed their situation from investigation to immediate danger. Elena's phone vibrated with a low battery warning, and she realized that their light sources wouldn't last much longer. But more importantly, every minute they spent in the underground facility increased the likelihood that they'd encounter someone who would ensure they never left to report what they'd discovered. A passage deeper into the underground complex led Elena and Marcus to a room that stopped them both in their tracks. Unlike the clinical sterility of the medical facility, this chamber was arranged like a macabre museum, its walls lined with glass display cases containing items that told the story of 5 decades of disappeared lives. Jewelry glittered under the harsh fluorescent lighting that someone had recently installed. Watches, rings, necklaces, and bracelets were arranged with museum-quality precision, each item mounted on black velvet with a small placard containing information that made Elena's stomach lurch. The placards weren't typical museum labels. Instead, they contained performance dates, client identification numbers, and disposition codes that reduced human lives to inventory management. A child's charm bracelet bore a tag reading Subject 247. Age 12. Performance date July 15, 1985. Disposition Sold. Private collection. Marcus moved systematically through the displays, photographing each item and its accompanying documentation. The collection spanned decades, with the oldest pieces showing the tarnish and wear of age while newer editions still gleamed. With recent polish, Elena found herself drawn to a display case, containing driver's licenses and identification, cards arranged in chronological order. The faces staring back at her from the plastic cards were ones she'd seen in missing person reports, on milk cartons, and in the desperate pleas of families who'd never stopped searching for their loved ones. "My God, Marcus," she whispered, pointing to a familiar driver's license. "I covered this disappearance. Rebecca Manning disappeared from a hiking trail about 30 miles from here in 1982. The search went on for months." Marcus joined her at the identification display, his face pale as he recognized several cards. "My sister," he said quietly, pointing to a license bearing the name Jennifer Chen. "She disappeared 20 years ago. The police said she probably ran away to California. That teenage girls do that sometimes." The license photo showed a 16-year-old girl with Marcus's same dark eyes and serious expression. The placard beside it read, "Subject 184, age 16, performance date multiple, disposition, training facility transfer, 1995. Elena placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder as he photographed his sister's identification with trembling hands. The clinical documentation couldn't hide the fact that Jennifer had been systematically abused and sold like property, her life reduced to a series of coded transactions. The jewelry collection contained items from victims spanning 5 decades, but the identification cards revealed an even more disturbing pattern. Many of the missing people had been teenagers or young adults who disappeared while hiking, camping, or traveling through remote areas. The operation had clearly perfected a system for targeting vulnerable individuals who wouldn't be missed immediately. In the center of the room, Elena discovered a different type of display case containing video equipment and what appeared to be a comprehensive recording library. Thousands of videotapes and digital storage devices were organized by date and subject number, creating a permanent archive of the crimes committed in this facility. The recording equipment was sophisticated and appeared regularly updated. Professional cameras, editing systems, and distribution equipment suggested that the operations revenue streams extended far beyond the immediate sale of victims to include ongoing exploitation through recorded content. Marcus found operational records showing that the facility had evolved from a simple trafficking operation into a comprehensive criminal enterprise. The recording library was categorized for different markets, with some content apparently sold to individual collectors while other material was distributed through networks that Elena preferred not to think about too deeply. A computer workstation in the corner of the trophy room contained client databases and order fulfillment systems that treated human trafficking like any other business operation. Purchase orders, delivery schedules, and customer satisfaction surveys reduced the most horrific crimes imaginable to routine business transactions. The customer database contained thousands of entries with detailed preference, profiles, and purchase histories. Many clients were repeat customers who'd been buying victims for decades, their preferences carefully tracked and accommodated by the operations staff. Elena discovered that the facility offered various service levels, from one-time experiences to permanent acquisitions. The pricing structures were complex, with premiums charged for specific physical attributes, age ranges, and psychological profiles. "This isn't just human trafficking," Marcus said, reading through client communications. "It's a fully integrated criminal enterprise with customer service, quality control, and long-term client relationships." The trophy room's inventory represented not just the lives destroyed by the operation, but also the evidence needed to bring down a network that had operated with impunity for 50 years. Each item connected to unsolved cases that could finally be resolved, bringing closure to families who'd never stopped hoping for answers. But as Eleanor and Marcus documented the evidence, both realized that their discovery had made them targets of an organization with unlimited resources and 5 decades of experience in making problems disappear permanently. Beyond the trophy room, Elena and Marcus discovered what could only be described as the operation's nerve center. A sophisticated office complex had been carved from the mountain itself, complete with climate control, systems and communication equipment that rivaled anything they'd seen in corporate environments. The centerpiece of the office was a massive leather-bound ledger that sat open on an ornate wooden desk. Unlike the admission records Elena had found in the ticket booth, this book contained information that revealed the true scope of the criminal enterprise they'd uncovered. Marcus opened the ledger carefully, noting immediately that the entries were written in multiple hands and languages. The book appeared to serve as a master directory for an international network of clients, suppliers, and partner organizations spanning 6 continents. Each page contained detailed client profiles with information that went far beyond simple contact details. Political affiliations, business interests, family connections, and personal vulnerabilities were documented with the thoroughness of intelligence agency files. The clients weren't just customers, they were carefully cultivated assets whose participation ensured mutual protection and ongoing cooperation. Elena photographed page after page, recognizing names that included heads of state, corporate executives, entertainment industry leaders, and religious figures. The client base represented a cross-section of global power structures, each entry containing enough personal information to suggest extensive surveillance and intelligence-gathering operations. "Look at this section," Marcus said, pointing to a series of entries marked with red ink. "These appear to be clients who also serve as suppliers. They're not just buying victims, they're providing them from their own organizations and spheres of influence." The supplier network included modeling agencies, children's homes, educational institutions, and social service organizations. The ledger documented a systematic infiltration of institutions designed to protect vulnerable populations, turning them into hunting grounds for the trafficking operation. Financial records interspersed throughout the client profiles revealed transaction volumes that dwarfed anything Elena had imagined. Individual purchases ranged from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, while annual client spending often exceeded $10 million per individual. The payment systems were sophisticated enough to avoid traditional banking oversight. Cryptocurrency transactions, art purchases, real estate transfers, and charitable donations all served as vehicles for moving money through the network while maintaining plausible legitimacy. Marcus discovered a section of the ledger dedicated to what appeared to be protection services. Payments to law enforcement officials, prosecutors, judges, and political figures ensured that investigations were derailed and evidence disappeared before cases could proceed to trial. The protection network explained how the operation had continued for 50 years without significant interference. Rather than simply avoiding law enforcement, they'd systematically corrupted the systems designed to stop them, creating a protective infrastructure that made prosecution nearly impossible. Elena found entries documenting the recruitment and compromise of key officials through a combination of financial incentives and manufactured blackmail situations. The organization didn't just buy protection, they created it by ensuring that anyone in a position to threaten them became complicit in their crimes. The ledger contained detailed records of political campaigns that had received funding, judicial appointments that had been influenced, and investigative journalists who'd been either bought off or eliminated. The scope of corruption was breathtaking in its thoroughness and systematic implementation. A separate section documented the organization's expansion into new markets and service offerings. Beyond traditional trafficking, they'd developed expertise in organ harvesting, genetic research, pharmaceutical testing, and what appeared to be some form of psychological experimentation program. The research programs were conducted in partnership with legitimate institutions whose reputations provided cover for activities that would have been impossible to conduct openly. University medical programs, pharmaceutical companies, and government research facilities all appeared as partners in various experimental protocols. Marcus found evidence that the operation had evolved far beyond its circus origins into something resembling a criminal corporation with multiple revenue streams and international partnerships. The ledger documented subsidiary operations in dozens of countries, each adapted to local conditions while maintaining connection to the central command structure. The client database included detailed preference profiles that went beyond simple demographic information. Psychological profiles, behavioral patterns, and specific trauma responses were catalogued with scientific precision, suggesting that the organization's understanding of human psychology rivaled that of legitimate research institutions. Elena discovered that many clients were themselves victims of systematic blackmail operations. Initial voluntary participation was documented through recordings and evidence that ensured ongoing cooperation even from those who might have wanted to withdraw from the network. The ledger served as both operational guide and insurance policy, containing enough evidence to destroy thousands of powerful individuals if the organization ever faced serious threats. The mutual vulnerability it documented created a web of complicity that protected the network through shared guilt rather than shared loyalty. As they documented the ledger's contents, Elena and Marcus realized they'd uncovered evidence of what might be the largest criminal conspiracy in modern history, protected by a corruption network that reached into the highest levels of government, business, and social institutions worldwide. Elena's growing unease proved justified when she discovered a trash bin in the office complex that contained recent meal containers with expiration dates from the current week. The branded packaging from a regional convenience store chain meant someone had been shopping locally within the past few days. Marcus found similar evidence throughout the underground facility. Fresh bottled water, recently used coffee cups, and newspapers dated from the current month all pointed to active occupancy. What they'd assumed was an abandoned historical crime scene was actually a functioning criminal enterprise. The meal containers were diverse enough to suggest multiple people currently using the facility. Different food preferences, dietary restrictions, and portion sizes indicated a staff of at least 6 to 8 individuals, maintaining regular residence in the underground complex. Elena photographed each piece of fresh evidence while Marcus explored adjacent rooms they hadn't yet examined. The living quarters they discovered were Spartan but comfortable, clearly designed for extended occupancy by operational staff who needed to remain on site for security purposes. Personal belongings in the living areas revealed details about the current occupants. Prescription medications, clothing sizes, and personal hygiene products suggested a mix of ages and genders among the staff. Some items indicated military or law enforcement backgrounds, while others suggested technical or medical expertise. Marcus discovered a maintenance schedule posted on a bulletin board that outlined current operational requirements. Daily security patrols, weekly supply runs, monthly facility inspections, and quarterly client visits were all documented with the precision of a legitimate business operation. The schedule revealed that they were currently between operational cycles, with the next client event scheduled for the following weekend. But more immediately concerning were the daily security patrols, which according to the schedule should have already detected their presence. Elena found evidence of recent vehicle traffic in a concealed parking area behind the main facility. Tire tracks in the soft earth were fresh, and oil stains suggested regular use by multiple vehicles. A hidden access road led away from the circus grounds toward what appeared to be a connection with a forestry service road. Several miles away, The vehicle evidence explained how the operation could function so deep in the wilderness while maintaining the supplies and personnel necessary for ongoing activities. The access road was carefully concealed but professionally maintained, suggesting significant investment in infrastructure over many years. Marcus discovered communication equipment that indicated the facility maintained regular contact with outside networks. Satellite internet connections, encrypted radio systems, and multiple telephone lines all suggested sophisticated coordination with external command structures. The communication logs showed recent activity, including status reports filed within the past 24 hours and scheduling confirmations for upcoming operational activities. The organization's efficiency was chilling in its professionalism and attention to detail. Elena found evidence that someone had been monitoring their exploration. Security cameras hidden throughout the facility had been recording their activities since they first entered the underground complex. Motion sensors and silent alarms had tracked their movements with precision. That meant their presence was definitely known. The surveillance system was far more sophisticated than anything they'd expected to find in an abandoned facility. High-definition cameras, thermal imaging equipment, and motion tracking systems created a comprehensive monitoring network that left no area unwatched. Marcus discovered that the security system automatically transmitted alerts to external monitoring stations whenever unauthorized individuals entered the facility. Their exploration had triggered multiple alarms, sending detailed reports to whoever was responsible for facility security. The alert logs showed that their presence had been detected within minutes of entering the tunnel system. Real-time updates had been transmitted, documenting their movement through each section of the complex, creating a comprehensive record of everything they'd seen and photographed. Elena realized with growing horror that their attempt to gather evidence had instead provided the organization with detailed intelligence about exactly how much they knew and what evidence they'd collected. The surveillance system had turned their investigation against them. The communication equipment included what appeared to be direct lines to law enforcement agencies, suggesting that the organization could coordinate with corrupted officials to manage security threats before they became serious problems. Response protocols were clearly established for dealing with unauthorized discoveries. Marcus found evidence that similar security breaches had occurred periodically over the years, each one documented and resolved according to established procedures. The organization had extensive experience in managing situations exactly like the one they now found themselves in, the meal containers that had first alerted them to current occupancy now seemed less like careless oversight and more like deliberate evidence left to communicate that the facility was under active protection. Their discovery was not accidental. It was part of a controlled response to their unauthorized presence. As Elena and Marcus absorbed the implications of what they'd learned, both realized that their situation had transformed from dangerous to potentially fatal. They weren't just witnesses to historical crimes. They were active threats to an ongoing operation with the resources and experience to eliminate problems permanently. Elena's worst fears were confirmed when Marcus discovered a monitor room filled with screens showing real-time security camera footage. They could see themselves on multiple feeds, their exploration of the facility documented in high-definition detail from angles they hadn't even noticed. The security footage archive contained terabytes of recorded material spanning months of recent activity. The system automatically saved and categorized all recordings, creating a permanent record of everyone who'd entered the facility, including their own unauthorized visit. Marcus scrolled through recent footage, finding evidence of regular staff activities over the past several weeks. The recordings showed people moving through the facility with casual familiarity, maintaining equipment, updating records, and conducting what appeared to be routine operational activities. Elena counted at least 8 different individuals in the recent recordings, each moving through the facility with obvious knowledge of its layout and security systems. The staff operated with military-like efficiency, suggesting professional training and extensive experience with clandestine operations. The surveillance system included facial recognition, software that had automatically identified Elena and Marcus from public databases within minutes of their arrival. Their names, addresses, employment information, and family details were displayed on screens alongside their live camera feeds. The automated system had already compiled detailed profiles of both intruders, including their professional backgrounds, financial information, and potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited for control or elimination purposes. The organization's intelligence capabilities rivaled those of government agencies. Marcus discovered that the surveillance system routinely monitored local law enforcement communications, news reports, and social media for any references to the facility or its activities. The system provided early warning of potential security threats, while identifying opportunities to influence or corrupt. Investigative efforts, Elena found evidence that their cell phones had been automatically compromised when they entered the facility. The security system had gained access to their contacts, messages, and location data, providing the organization with detailed intelligence about their personal lives and professional networks. The phone monitoring revealed that the organization now knew about Elena's journalism background and Marcus's investigative skills. More concerning, they had access to information about Elena's family members and Marcus's remaining relatives who could be used as leverage to ensure cooperation. The surveillance logs showed that security alerts had been automatically distributed to multiple external monitoring stations within minutes of their arrival. The organization's response network extended far beyond the immediate facility, suggesting coordination with partners in law enforcement, private security, and possibly intelligence agencies. Marcus discovered that the monitoring system included capabilities for real-time behavioral analysis and threat assessment. Artificial intelligence algorithms had been evaluating their actions throughout their exploration, categorizing their threat level and recommending response protocols. The threat assessment classified Elena and Marcus as high-priority containment required based on their professional backgrounds, the evidence they'd collected, and their apparent understanding of the operation's scope and significance. The system had automatically initiated procedures for managing serious security breaches. Elena found communication logs showing that external teams had been notified and were en route to the facility. Response times suggested that professional security personnel would arrive within hours, if not sooner, to address what the system classified as a critical security incident. The response protocols included detailed procedures for managing different types of security breaches. Options ranged from intimidation and coercion to more permanent solutions, depending on the perceived threat level and the intruder's potential value as assets rather than liabilities. Marcus discovered that the organization maintained extensive files on local law enforcement personnel, including detailed assessments of which officials could be trusted to cooperate and which might need to be managed through other means. The corruption network was both comprehensive and current. The surveillance system had automatically evaluated Elena and Marcus's potential value as recruitment targets versus their threat level as witnesses. The assessment considered their professional skills, personal vulnerabilities, and family situations in determining optimal management strategies. Elena realized with growing horror that their attempt to document evidence had instead provided the organization with everything needed to neutralize them effectively. The surveillance system had created detailed profiles of their weaknesses, motivations, and pressure points. The monitoring room contained evidence that similar security breaches had been managed successfully over the years through a combination of corruption, intimidation, and, when necessary, elimination. The organization had extensive experience in protecting its operations from discovery. Marcus found recordings of previous intruders being confronted by security personnel, Some were successfully recruited or intimidated into silence, while others simply disappeared from the surveillance record without explanation. Their fate left deliberately ambiguous. The surveillance footage archive served as both operational tool and insurance policy, documenting not just security breaches, but also the successful management of threats over decades of operation. The organization's track record of maintaining secrecy was both impressive and terrifying. As Elena and Marcus absorbed the full scope of their predicament, both realized that their discovery of the surveillance system had completed their transformation from investigators to hunted prey in a game where the rules heavily favored their pursuers. The sound of vehicles approaching through the forest reached Elena and Marcus as they desperately searched for escape routes. Through the surveillance monitors, they watched 3 black SUVs navigate the hidden access road with the confidence of people who'd made this journey many times before. Elena grabbed an employee handbook she'd spotted on a desk, quickly flipping through pages that detailed security protocols and operational procedures. The manual was professionally produced, complete with organizational charts, emergency procedures, and standardized responses for various types of incidents. The handbook categorized security breaches into multiple threat levels, with specific protocols for each scenario. Level 1, curious locals, required minimal intervention, usually involving friendly redirection away from the area. Level 5, hostile intelligence gathering, called for immediate containment and assessment for recruitment or elimination. Marcus read over her shoulder as Elena photographed key pages. Their situation clearly qualified as Level 4 or 5, involving unauthorized documentation by qualified personnel. The response protocols were chillingly detailed, outlining procedures for psychological evaluation, leverage assessment, and final disposition decisions. The manual included detailed profiles of local law enforcement officials, complete with assessments of their corruptibility, personal vulnerabilities, and current financial situations. Several officers were marked as reliable assets, while others were classified as potential threats requiring careful management. Elena discovered a section titled Guest Management that outlined procedures for handling reluctant participants in the organization's activities. The euphemistic language couldn't disguise protocols for kidnapping, psychological manipulation, and systematic abuse designed to ensure compliance. The employee handbook detailed career advancement opportunities within the organization, including specialized training programs for surveillance, interrogation, and what was diplomatically termed problem resolution. The organization operated like a legitimate corporation, complete with performance reviews and professional development opportunities. Marcus found organizational charts showing the facility's position within a much larger criminal enterprise. The Circus operation was just one node in a network spanning multiple countries, with specialized facilities for different aspects of the trafficking and exploitation business. The 3 approaching vehicles had stopped just outside camera range, but thermal imaging showed multiple armed individuals conducting what appeared to be a tactical assessment of the situation. The response team was clearly professional, moving with coordination that suggested military or law enforcement training. Elena photographed pages detailing standard operating procedures for witness management. The protocols included psychological profiling techniques designed to identify the most effective approaches for each individual situation. Some witnesses could be intimidated into silence, others recruited through financial incentives or blackmail, and some required more permanent solutions. The handbook contained detailed case studies of previous security incidents and their resolutions. Elena recognized several cases from her journalism background, missing person reports that had been classified as voluntary disappearances or accidental deaths. The organization's success rate in managing security threats was disturbingly high. Marcus discovered that the employee handbook included communication protocols for coordinating with corrupted officials in various agencies. The procedures ensured that any investigations would be compromised from the start, with evidence disappearing and witnesses becoming unavailable. Before cases could develop, the manual detailed recruitment strategies for expanding the organization's network of protected assets within government, law enforcement, and media organizations. The systematic approach to corruption was comprehensive, targeting individuals through a combination of financial incentives, manufactured compromises, and family safety concerns. Elena found a section outlining the organization's insurance policies against discovery. Beyond corrupted officials and compromised investigations, they maintained extensive blackmail files on thousands of powerful individuals who could be leveraged to prevent serious legal action. The handbook included profiles of journalists who'd attempted to investigate similar operations in other locations. Some had been successfully discredited through manufactured scandals. Others had experienced career difficulties that effectively ended their investigative capabilities. And a few had simply stopped pursuing their stories without explanation. Marcus counted 8 armed individuals on the thermal imaging displays, all moving with tactical precision toward facility entrances. The response team was equipped with professional-grade weapons and communication equipment, suggesting significant investment in security capabilities. The employee handbook contained evacuation procedures for different threat scenarios, including detailed escape routes and safe house locations. The organization had clearly learned from decades of operation that preparation for discovery was essential to long-term survival. Elena realized that the handbook served multiple purposes beyond employee guidance. It documented the organization's capabilities and reach in ways that would terrify potential threats while providing recruitment materials for individuals who might be convinced to join rather than oppose their operations. The approaching security team had split into multiple groups, with thermal imaging showing coordinated movement to cover all known exits from the facility. The tactical deployment suggested extensive knowledge of the facility's layout and experience with similar containment operations. As Elena and Marcus absorbed the handbook's implications, both understood that their situation had moved beyond immediate physical danger to encompass threats against their families, careers, and anyone who might assist them in exposing what they discovered. Elena frantically searched through desk drawers while Marcus monitored the security feeds, watching the armed teams position themselves around the facility. In a filing cabinet marked Emergency Procedures, she discovered a set of architectural blueprints that revealed far more about the facility than they'd previously understood. The blueprints showed the underground complex extending nearly a mile in multiple directions, with tunnel systems connecting to natural caves, abandoned mine shafts, and even a connection to an old railway tunnel that had been forgotten since the 1940s. The facility was far larger and more sophisticated than their exploration had revealed. Marcus studied the blueprint over Elena's shoulder, identifying multiple escape routes they hadn't discovered during their initial exploration. The plans showed hidden exits camouflaged as natural rock formations, emergency passages disguised as utility tunnels, and even an underwater exit that connected to an underground stream system. The architectural drawings revealed that the circus grounds were just the visible portion of a massive underground installation. The blueprints showed levels they hadn't even suspected, extending deep into the mountain with facilities for housing, medical procedures, training operations, and what appeared to be manufacturing capabilities. Elena photographed every page of the blueprints, while Marcus identified their best chance for escape. The nearest emergency exit led through a maintenance tunnel that emerged nearly half a mile from the main facility, well beyond the perimeter being established by the security teams. The blueprints included detailed security information, showing camera positions, sensor networks, and automated defense systems throughout the complex. But more importantly, they also showed the blind spots and maintenance access points that could be used to avoid detection during an escape attempt. Marcus discovered that the tunnel system included multiple branches, some leading to dead ends designed to confuse unauthorized explorers, while others connected to external networks that could provide genuine escape routes. The facility's designers had clearly planned for various emergency scenarios. The architectural plans showed that several tunnels led to concealed exits in different directions, spreading across miles of wilderness. The organization had invested enormous resources in creating a facility that could be evacuated quickly if necessary, with personnel dispersing through multiple routes to avoid detection. Elena found sections of the blueprint that detailed the facility's power systems, water supplies, and communication networks. The installation was designed for complete self-sufficiency, capable of operating independently. For extended periods without external support, the power system included both conventional electrical connections and multiple backup generators, ensuring continuous operation even if external power sources were compromised. The communication networks included satellite uplinks, underground cable connections, and radio relay systems that provided redundant connectivity. Marcus identified a route through the maintenance tunnels that would take them to the old railway tunnel connection. From there, the blueprints showed they could follow the abandoned railway bed for several miles before emerging near a state highway where they might find help. The security feeds showed the response teams had completed their perimeter deployment and were beginning systematic entry procedures. The thermal imaging revealed they were using professional breach tactics, suggesting extensive training in facility assault operations. Elena discovered that the blueprints included timing information for various escape routes, showing expected travel times and potential obstacles for each path. The facility's designers had clearly tested these routes extensively, providing detailed guidance for emergency evacuations. The architectural plans revealed that the facility included holding areas they hadn't discovered during their exploration, multiple levels of underground cells, medical facilities, and what appeared to be training areas suggested the operation was far larger than they'd realized. Marcus found sections of the blueprint that showed connections to other facilities, with tunnel networks extending toward what appeared to be similar installations at different locations. The organization operated multiple sites, connected through underground transportation networks. The blueprints included detailed information about the facility's defensive capabilities, showing automated systems that could seal off sections, flood tunnels, or activate other countermeasures to prevent unauthorized access or escape. The installation was designed as much for security as for concealment. Elena realized that the escape route through the maintenance tunnels would require them to travel through areas of the facility they hadn't yet explored, potentially encountering additional security measures or personnel they hadn't accounted for in their planning. The architectural drawings showed that their chosen escape route would take approximately 45 minutes to traverse, assuming they could maintain the pace indicated on the blueprints and didn't encounter unexpected obstacles or security measures. Marcus checked the security feeds one final time, noting that the response teams were beginning their systematic search of the facility. They had perhaps 10 minutes before the search reached their current location, making immediate action essential for any chance of successful escape. The blueprints provided them with detailed information about their escape route, but also revealed the enormous scope of the criminal enterprise they'd discovered, making their survival and successful reporting of the evidence even more critical for exposing the organization's activities. Marcus made the difficult decision to split their escape efforts, knowing that their chances improved if the security teams had to track multiple targets. Elena would follow the maintenance tunnel route they'd identified in the blueprints, carrying the photographic evidence on her phone and the key documents they'd collected, In a storage closet near the facility's emergency systems, Marcus discovered an emergency flare gun among the safety equipment. The device was designed for maritime distress signals, but could serve multiple purposes in their current situation. He checked that it was loaded and functional before concealing it in his jacket. Elena gathered the most critical evidence into a waterproof document bag she'd found in the office area. The admission ledger, selected medical charts, key pages from the employee handbook, and the architectural blueprints would provide investigators with enough evidence to launch a comprehensive investigation. Marcus would create a diversion by triggering the facility's fire suppression system while Elena escaped through the maintenance tunnels. The distraction would draw security personnel away from her escape route, while potentially providing him with his own opportunity to reach the surface. The fire suppression system was sophisticated, with manual activation points throughout the facility and automatic sensors that could be triggered by smoke or heat. Marcus identified the main control panel in the communications room, noting that activation would flood multiple sections with chemical suppressants while triggering audible alarms. Elena tested her chosen escape route, following the maintenance tunnel for several hundred yards to ensure it was passable, and led in the direction indicated by the blueprints. The tunnel was narrow but navigable, with service ladders providing access to different levels of the facility. The maintenance tunnel showed evidence of recent use, with fresh footprints in the dust and recently serviced equipment suggesting that facility personnel used these passages regularly for operational activities. Elena would need to move carefully to avoid encountering staff members during her escape. Marcus positioned himself near the fire suppression controls while monitoring the security feeds to time his diversion for maximum effectiveness. The response teams were systematically searching the facility's main areas, but hadn't yet discovered the office complex where Elena was preparing to enter the escape tunnel. The emergency flare gun could serve multiple purposes beyond creating a diversion. If Marcus reached the surface, the flare could signal for help from any search and rescue teams that might be operating in the area. More immediately, it could be used as a weapon if he encountered security personnel during his own escape attempt. Elena began her journey through the maintenance tunnel, using her phone's flashlight sparingly to conserve battery while navigating by touch when possible. The tunnel system was more complex than the blueprints had indicated, with multiple branches and service areas that required careful navigation to avoid getting lost. Marcus activated the fire suppression system, triggering alarms throughout the facility while chemical suppressants began flooding the main operational areas. The response was immediate and dramatic, with security personnel radioing confusion and requesting instructions for handling the emergency situation. The diversion worked better than Marcus had hoped, drawing the entire response team toward the main facility areas while creating enough chaos to mask his own movement through the complex. He used the confusion to reach the surface through a concealed exit near the original circus grounds. Elena's progress through the maintenance tunnels was slower than anticipated, as she encountered locked gates and security barriers that required careful bypassing. The blueprints hadn't indicated all the security measures built into the escape routes, suggesting that even emergency exits were monitored and controlled. Marcus emerged from the facility into the forest, immediately using the flare gun to signal his position to any potential rescue teams, while creating a visible marker that Elena could use to orient herself when she reached the surface. The bright red flare arced high above the trees, visible for miles in the clear mountain air. The maintenance tunnel eventually led Elena to a natural cave system that connected to the old railway tunnel indicated on the blueprints. The cave passages were challenging to navigate in darkness, but eventually opened into the larger tunnel that would lead her away from the immediate danger area. Marcus moved through the forest toward the state highway indicated on the blueprints, following game trails and natural features to avoid leaving obvious tracks that could be followed by the security teams. His military training from his younger years provided essential skills for wilderness movement and concealment. Elena followed the abandoned railway tunnel for what felt like hours, guided by the slight airflow that indicated a connection to the surface. The tunnel showed evidence of recent maintenance, suggesting that the organization used this route regularly for transportation and supply operations. The flare signal Marcus had fired proved effective, attracting the attention of a Forest Service helicopter that had been conducting routine fire patrol operations in the area. The pilot investigated the signal source, providing an unexpected rescue opportunity that neither Elena nor Marcus had anticipated in their escape planning. Elena's flashlight beam caught movement in the tunnel ahead, and she immediately shut off the light, pressing herself against the wall. Footsteps approached in the darkness, moving with the careful pace of someone familiar with the terrain, but exercising caution. A young woman's voice called out softly, "Please don't run. I'm not with them. I'm trying to get out too." Elena waited in silence, every instinct warning her against trusting anyone she might encounter in this place. But the voice carried genuine fear and desperation that seemed inconsistent with the professional competence of the security personnel they'd been avoiding. "My name is Sarah Chen," the voice continued. "I've been held here for 6 months. I escaped during the confusion when the alarm started. Are you the people who triggered the emergency systems?" Elena made a careful decision, turning her phone's light back on, but keeping it directed toward the ground to avoid creating a bright target. In the dim illumination, she could see a young woman in her early 20s, wearing clothes that were clean but showed signs of long wear. Sarah carried a small notebook that she clutched protectively against her chest. Elena could see that it was filled with handwritten text, the pages covered with cramped writing in multiple colors of ink that suggested it had been compiled over an extended period. "This is my journal," Sarah explained, noticing Elena's attention. "I've been documenting everything that happens here, everyone I've seen, every detail I could remember. I knew that if I ever got out, I'd need evidence." Elena introduced herself quickly, explaining their situation and their need to reach safety before the security teams discovered their escape route. Sarah's local knowledge and understanding of the facility's operations could be invaluable for avoiding recapture. Sarah's journal contained detailed observations about the facility's daily operations, staff schedules, and the systematic processes used to acquire and process victims. Her first-hand account provided insights that the documents Elena had photographed couldn't convey. "They don't just take random people," Sarah explained as they moved together through the tunnel. "They research targets for months, learning their routines, their vulnerabilities, their family situations. They choose people who won't be missed immediately or whose disappearances can be explained away." The journal documented how the organization used social media and online dating platforms to identify and contact potential victims. Sarah described elaborate deception, operations that could take weeks or months to develop, trust before victims were lured to isolated locations. Elena learned that the facility processed dozens of victims each year, with some being held for short periods, while others remained for extended conditioning before being transferred to other locations or sold to specific clients. The operation was far more active than the historical evidence had suggested. Sarah's observations revealed that the organization operated multiple recruitment networks, including modeling agencies, employment services, and even educational programs that served as hunting grounds for vulnerable individuals. The systematic approach explained how they maintained steady supplies of victims over decades. "The staff rotates regularly," Sarah continued, "but there's always a core group that's been here for years. They know every tunnel, every exit, every security measure. That's why we need to be careful about which route we take." Eleanor showed Sarah the architectural blueprints she'd discovered, and Sarah immediately identified several routes that were monitored by motion sensors or staffed during emergency situations. Her practical knowledge of current security measures was essential for safe navigation. The journal contained detailed descriptions of the psychological manipulation techniques used to break down resistance and create compliance among victims. Sarah had carefully documented the systematic approach to destroying individual identity and replacing it with learned helplessness. They use a combination of isolation, sleep deprivation, medication, and psychological manipulation, Sarah explained. But they're also very careful not to damage their products beyond what specific clients request. It's all very calculated and professional. Elena realized that Sarah's journal represented not just evidence of crimes, but a comprehensive manual for understanding how modern human trafficking operations functioned at the highest levels of sophistication and organization. Sarah led Elena through sections of the tunnel system that avoided the most heavily monitored areas, using knowledge gained through 6 months of careful observation and several previous escape attempts that had been unsuccessful due to the facility's comprehensive security measures. There are others still down there, Sarah said quietly. People who've been held for years, people who've given up hope of ever leaving. I wanted to help them, but I knew that if I didn't take this chance when the alarms created confusion, I might never get another opportunity. Eleanor documented Sarah's information while they traveled, understanding that the combination of photographic evidence from the facility and Sarah's first-hand testimony would provide law enforcement with unprecedented insight into a criminal enterprise that had operated in secrecy for 50 years. Meanwhile, Marcus had discovered a sophisticated communication center deeper in the facility than the office complex Elena had explored. Banks of monitors displayed what appeared to be real-time feeds from similar facilities around the world, suggesting a level of international coordination that dwarfed anything they'd previously imagined. Among the high-tech equipment, Marcus found an encrypted communication device that had been left active during the emergency evacuation. The device displayed recent message traffic between facility coordinators across multiple continents, revealing operational details about an enterprise that spanned the globe. The messages were coded, but followed patterns that Marcus's investigative background helped him decipher. References to shipments, inventory, and client delivery. Schedules painted a picture of human trafficking operations coordinated across time zones and international borders with corporate-level efficiency. Recent communications showed preparations for what appeared to be a major event. Scheduled for the following weekend, multiple facilities were coordinating to provide specialized inventory for what the messages referred to as a premium client. Gathering at an unspecified location, Marcus discovered that the communication device contained scheduling information for transportation networks that moved victims between facilities and ultimately to buyers worldwide. The logistics were complex, involving private aircraft, shipping containers, and ground transportation networks that operated with apparent immunity from law enforcement interference. The device revealed that the organization maintained real-time inventory tracking systems, monitoring the location and status of victims across their entire network. Each individual was assigned identification numbers and tracked through a database that treated human beings like commercial products. The communication logs showed that the organization operated with military-style command structures, with facility commanders reporting to regional coordinators who answered to international oversight authorities. The chain of command was clear, professional, and designed to insulate higher-level leadership from direct involvement in operational activities. Marcus found evidence that the communication network included direct connections to corrupted officials in law enforcement, customs services, and immigration authorities. The messages revealed systematic coordination with government officials who provided protection and assistance for trafficking operations. The device contained financial transaction records showing money movement through international banking networks, cryptocurrency exchanges, and legitimate business enterprises that served as fronts for laundering trafficking profits. The financial sophistication rivaled that of major corporations. Recent communications revealed that the organization was aware of increased law enforcement attention in several countries and was implementing enhanced security measures across all facilities. The response to Elena and Marcus's intrusion was part of a broader security review triggered by external threats. Marcus discovered that the facility served as more than just a processing center for local victims. The communication logs showed it functioning as a training facility for personnel who would staff other operations, a testing ground for new techniques, and a secure meeting location for high-level organizational coordination. The encrypted device revealed that the organization maintained extensive intelligence files on law enforcement personnel, politicians, and journalists who might threaten their operations. The files included personal information, family details, and planned responses for neutralizing potential threats. The communication network included what appeared to be coordination with legitimate businesses that unknowingly provided cover for trafficking operations. Shipping companies, travel agencies, and hospitality businesses were manipulated through carefully planted personnel and corrupted management. Marcus found evidence that the organization operated research and development programs, testing new methods for victim acquisition, psychological manipulation, and client satisfaction. The systematic approach to improving their criminal techniques was chilling in its professional thoroughness. The device contained client communication protocols that revealed how buyers placed orders for specific types of victims, with detailed specifications for physical attributes, psychological profiles, and conditioning requirements. The organization operated like a custom manufacturing service for human exploitation. Recent messages showed coordination with similar networks in Europe, Asia, and South America, suggesting that the organization was part of a global consortium of trafficking enterprises that shared resources, techniques, and markets while maintaining operational independence. Marcus realized that accessing the communication device had provided him with intelligence about imminent crimes that could be prevented if law enforcement acted quickly. The weekend event alone would involve dozens of victims and hundreds of powerful clients who could be arrested and prosecuted. The encrypted communications revealed that the organization's response to security breaches included systematic elimination of evidence and witnesses, but also showed vulnerabilities in their coordination that could be exploited by properly informed law enforcement agencies. As Marcus documented the intelligence from the communication device, he understood that he'd uncovered evidence of what might be the largest criminal enterprise in human history. With the power to corrupt governments and the sophistication to operate with near impunity across international borders, the device continued receiving real-time updates about the search for Elena and himself, revealing that the organization was mobilizing resources from multiple facilities to ensure that their security breach didn't compromise the broader network's operations. Elena and Sarah had nearly reached the end of the railway tunnel when they encountered the facility's head of security, a man in his 50s with the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. He wasn't armed with obvious weapons, but his presence in the tunnel meant their escape route had been anticipated and compromised. "Ms. Rodriguez, Ms. Chen," he said calmly, using their names with casual familiarity that suggested extensive intelligence gathering. "I'm David Brennan, Facility Security Coordinator. I think we need to have a conversation." Elena noticed immediately that he carried a set of master keys on a retractable cord attached to his belt. The keys were numerous and appeared to provide access to every area of the facility, from the underground chambers to the surface structures, and probably including the various escape routes they'd been using. "You've seen quite a lot during your unauthorized visit," Brennan continued, his tone conversational rather than threatening. More than most people who stumble onto our operation. That creates certain complications, but also some interesting opportunities. Sarah pressed closer to Elena, clearly recognizing Brennan and fearing what his presence in the tunnel meant for their escape attempt. Her journal contained detailed observations about this man and his role in the facility's daily operations. The organization I represent has been operating successfully for over 50 years, Brennan explained. We've managed that longevity by being very careful about how we handle security situations. Sometimes that involves recruitment, sometimes relocation, and sometimes more permanent solutions. Elena realized that Brennan's calm demeanor and conversational tone were designed to create a false sense of security while he assessed their value as potential assets versus their threat level as witnesses. Every word was calculated to elicit information about their knowledge and intentions. Ms. Rodriguez, your journalism background makes you particularly valuable. We have ongoing needs for media management and public relations consulting. The compensation would be substantial, and the work would ensure your family's continued safety and prosperity. The master keys represented more than just physical access to the facility. They symbolized Brennan's authority within the organization and his ability to control access to information, evidence, and potentially to freedom itself. His casual display of the keys was psychological intimidation disguised as practical necessity. Miss Chen has been with us for 6 months, Brennan continued. She's proven quite resourceful and observant. With proper motivation, she could provide valuable intelligence about our security, procedures, and help us improve our operational effectiveness. Elena understood that Brennan was offering them a choice between cooperation and elimination, but that the choice itself was largely illusory. The organization's track record suggested that witnesses who initially cooperated often disappeared once their usefulness ended. Your friend Mr. Marcus has been equally impressive, Brennan said, revealing that Marcus's location and activities were being monitored in real time. His investigative skills and technical knowledge could be quite useful for our intelligence operations. The master keys clinked softly as Brennan moved, the sound emphasizing his control over their current situation. Elena noted that several keys appeared to be electronic rather than traditional mechanical keys, suggesting sophisticated access control systems throughout the facility. The evidence you've collected is certainly comprehensive, Brennan acknowledged. But evidence requires credible witnesses to present it, and witnesses require personal safety to remain credible. These are all manageable variables from our perspective. Sarah's journal had documented Brennan's role in recruiting new personnel through a combination of coercion and incentives. Many current staff members had initially been brought to the facility as victims or investigators, only to be converted into willing participants through systematic manipulation. The organization operates in many countries. Ms. Rodriguez, we could arrange for you to continue your journalism career in locations where your previous work wouldn't be relevant, and your new assignments would focus on topics we find acceptable. Elena realized that the master keys represented not just physical access, but also symbolic authority within a criminal enterprise that had corrupted officials, compromised institutions, and eliminated threats for decades. Brennan's casual confidence suggested absolute faith in the organization's ability to control outcomes. Of course, non-cooperation would necessitate different arrangements, Brennan said, his tone remaining conversational while the threat became explicit. The mountain wilderness is full of hazards for inexperienced hikers. Search and rescue operations are often unsuccessful, and bodies are rarely recovered. The master keys swayed gently as Brennan stepped closer, their metallic sound creating an oddly hypnotic rhythm that seemed designed to focus attention while he continued his psychological assessment of their responses to various incentives and threats. Elena understood that their survival now depended on convincing Brennan that they posed greater value as assets than as threats. while simultaneously identifying opportunities to escape or overcome his control of their situation. Elena noticed a small electronic device clipped to Brennan's jacket that she hadn't seen initially. As their conversation continued, she realized it was a GPS tracker that was actively transmitting their location to external monitoring stations. The device explained how the security teams had been able to anticipate their escape route despite the facility's complex tunnel system. The GPS tracker was compact but sophisticated, displaying real-time coordinates and apparently capable of two-way communication. Elena could see indicator lights that suggested active data transmission, meaning their current location was being continuously updated to whoever was coordinating the pursuit. "The tracking technology we use has improved considerably over the years," Brennan said, noticing her attention to the device. "It's actually quite remarkable how accurately we can monitor movement through these tunnels, even with all the rock and interference." Sarah recognized the device from her months of observation within the facility. "They put those on all the staff," she whispered to Elena, "but they also use them to track people they're hunting. Once you're marked, they know exactly where you are at all times." Elena realized that Marcus was probably being tracked by similar devices, meaning that his escape to the surface and his signal flare had been monitored throughout. The organization's response capabilities were far more sophisticated than they'd understood. "Your colleague has been quite resourceful," Brennan confirmed, apparently reading Elena's thoughts. "But his forest movement patterns and current location are being tracked precisely. The helicopter he's hoping will rescue him is actually one of our assets responding to his signal." The GPS tracker represented the organization's technological superiority in managing security threats. Elena understood that their ability to track targets in real time gave them enormous advantages in both pursuit and elimination operations. "Ms. Chen made several escape attempts during her stay with us," Brennan continued. "Each time, we were able to locate her within hours and return her safely. The technology is quite reliable, and the mountain terrain actually enhances rather than degrades the tracking signals." Elena saw that the device displayed not just their current location, but also appeared to show the positions of other tracked individuals throughout the area. The screen revealed multiple active signals, suggesting that other people were being pursued simultaneously. "The weekend event I mentioned requires considerable security coordination," Brennan explained. "We're currently tracking several dozen individuals who need to be managed carefully to ensure operational security. You've inadvertently become part of a much larger security operation." Sarah pointed out details about the tracker that she'd observed during her captivity. "It sends alerts if someone tries to remove it or if the signal is blocked. They can also use it to deliver electric shocks if someone doesn't respond to recall commands." The GPS tracker's capabilities extended beyond simple location monitoring to include behavioral control mechanisms that could be activated remotely. Elena realized that the device represented both surveillance tool and weapon, giving the organization multiple options for managing tracked individuals. "The tracker technology has proven quite effective for managing our staff as well," Brennan said. "It provides excellent accountability and ensures that everyone understands their responsibilities and limitations." Within our organizational structure, Elena noticed that the device appeared to be receiving incoming messages, with text appearing on its small screen that Brennan glanced at periodically. The communications suggested real-time coordination, with multiple teams operating throughout the area. "Your Mr. Marcus has reached the helicopter, which is convenient for our purposes," Brennan reported, reading from the tracker screen. "Our pilot is quite experienced with these types of situations. Mr. Marcus will be returned here shortly for the same conversation we're having now." The GPS tracker represented the futility of trying to escape from an organization with unlimited resources and sophisticated technology. Elena understood that conventional escape Tactics were useless against opponents who could monitor their location continuously and coordinate responses in real time. The technology also allows us to demonstrate our commitment to finding solutions that work for everyone, Brennan said. Cooperation results in the tracker being removed and normal life resuming. Resistance results in permanent monitoring until more definitive solutions become necessary. Elena realized that the GPS tracker was both practical tool and psychological weapon, demonstrating the organization's technological capabilities while creating the impression that escape was impossible regardless of the efforts made. Sarah's journal contained observations about how the tracking technology was used to control behavior, even among people who weren't actively trying to escape. The constant monitoring created psychological pressure that encouraged compliance and discouraged resistance. The decision you need to make is quite simple, Brennan concluded, checking his tracker for updated information about Marcus's status. Join an organization that offers substantial compensation and protection, or resist an organization that has successfully eliminated every serious threat it's faced in 50 years of operation. 6 months later, Elena sat in a federal courthouse in Denver, holding a thick manila folder marked FBI Evidence File, Case 2024-7829, that contained comprehensive documentation of the largest human trafficking prosecution in U.S. history. The folder represented the culmination of everything Marcus and Sarah, had discovered during their terrifying encounter in the Montana wilderness. The FBI evidence file contained over 3,000 pages of documentation, including the photographs Elena had taken, the architectural blueprints Marcus had discovered, Sarah's detailed journal entries, and intelligence gathered from the encrypted communication device they'd found in the facility. Elena testified before the federal grand jury about their initial discovery of the orange flagging tape that had led them to the hidden circus grounds. Her photographs of the admission ledger, medical charts, and client databases had provided prosecutors with evidence linking hundreds of missing person cases to the trafficking operation. Marcus, seated beside her in the courtroom, had recovered from his encounter with the organization's helicopter crew. The pilot had indeed been working for the trafficking network, but a genuine Forest Service helicopter had responded to reports of the suspicious aircraft, leading to arrests and the discovery of the facility's location. The FBI evidence file documented the systematic dismantling of the criminal enterprise over the past 6 months. The investigation had expanded internationally, with arrests in 15 countries and the rescue of over 200 victims from facilities around the world. Sarah had become a key witness for the prosecution, her journal providing first-hand testimony about the organization's operations and helping investigators understand the psychological manipulation techniques used to control victims. Her detailed observations had been crucial for developing effective treatment programs for rescued individuals. The evidence file contained financial records showing the seizure of over $2 billion in assets connected to the trafficking network, bank accounts, real estate holdings, legitimate businesses, and cryptocurrency wallets had all been frozen or confiscated as prosecutors built cases against hundreds of participants. Elena had learned that David Brennan, the security coordinator who'd confronted them in the tunnel, had been arrested within hours of Marcus's rescue. The GPS tracker he'd carried had led FBI agents directly to multiple other facilities and safe houses, triggering a coordinated international operation. The client database they'd discovered had resulted in arrests that shocked the public. Politicians, business leaders, entertainment figures, and religious authorities were among those charged with participating in or supporting the trafficking network. Many had attempted to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced sentences. Marcus had provided testimony about his sister Jennifer, whose disappearance 20 years earlier had finally been resolved through evidence found in the facility's trophy room. Her remains had been located and returned to the family for proper burial, bringing closure to decades of uncertainty. The FBI evidence file documented how the organization's corruption network had been systematically exposed and dismantled. Law enforcement officials, prosecutors, and judges who'd been compromised were facing their own criminal charges, while protective networks that had shielded the operation for decades were being unraveled. Elena's journalism background had proven invaluable for helping investigators understand how to present the complex evidence in ways that juries and the public could comprehend. Her articles about the case had won national awards while maintaining the confidentiality necessary for ongoing prosecutions. The evidence file showed that the facility they discovered was just one of 47 similar operations worldwide. The international investigation had revealed a criminal enterprise that generated annual revenues exceeding those of many legitimate corporations while destroying thousands of lives. Sarah had enrolled in college with support from victim services programs, studying psychology with the goal of helping other trafficking survivors recover from their experiences. Her journal had been published with proceeds going to organizations that supported rescued victims. The architectural blueprints they'd found had led investigators to discover underground networks spanning hundreds of miles, connecting multiple facilities and providing insight into the enormous infrastructure investment the organization had made over decades of operation. Elena closed the FBI evidence file and looked around the courtroom, where the final defendants were being sentenced. The investigation had resulted in over 800 arrests worldwide, with trials ongoing in multiple countries as prosecutors worked to ensure that every participant faced justice. Marcus stood beside her as they left the courthouse, both understanding that their accidental discovery during a hiking trip had exposed and ultimately destroyed a criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity for half a century. The orange flagging tape that had led them into danger had ultimately led hundreds of victims back to freedom. The FBI evidence file would become part of legal history, documenting not just the crimes that had been committed, but also the courage of witnesses who'd risked everything to ensure that justice was finally served.